you think they have sex more than we do?
Oh my God. Like, ew, why are you thinking that? But anything's more than what we're doing, so.
Yeah.
It's like blowing up a balloon. It's like, it's getting there, and then it's like. So hot last night, I couldn't sleep.
Courtney, when you own your own house, you can freeze all you want.
I live with my parents because they're better than any roommate I've had.
She is wiping a grown man in a bathroom while another woman's name still lives in his phone. And if that doesn't make you pause for a second, then nothing will. This is not some casual dating hiccup or awkward early stage confusion. This is a full-blown contradiction, where one person is sacrificing dignity in the name of love, while the other is quietly keeping options open in the background. And the imbalance starts to feel less romantic and more strategic the longer you sit with it. When a relationship begins with hospital visits, physical therapy, and dependency instead of chemistry, desire, and equality, you have to ask yourself whether you are witnessing devotion or desperation. I'm Olavia, and welcome back to TLC Drama File Us, where we don't just recap the drama, we question it. So if you're tired of surface-level takes and want the real behavioral breakdowns, make sure you subscribe and tell me in the comments right now. Is this love or is this convenience dressed up as loyalty? Because here is the uncomfortable truth hiding under all the sympathy for an injured man trying to recover. When care replaces chemistry, something shifts, and sometimes it never shifts back. Courtney did not just invite Colt into her life. She moved him into her parents' home, into her daily routine, into her physical space at his most vulnerable moment. And vulnerability can build intimacy, but it can also build dependency. And dependency is not the same thing as devotion. One person becomes the rescuer, the other becomes the rescued, and the dynamic locks into place faster than anyone realizes. So the real question is not whether Colt is healing. The real question is whether he is changing. Is this a reformed version of a man with a messy past, or is this simply a temporary pause before old habits resurface? Is Courtney choosing to see growth, or is she choosing hope because hope feels better than doubt? And is this injury forcing honesty to the surface, or conveniently distracting everyone from what is happening behind the scenes? Because while she is playing nurse in her parents' house, something small but telling has already slipped through the crack, and it involves a pair of underwear that does not belong where it was found. Living with your partner is one thing. Living with your partner and her parents while you recover from an injury is something else entirely, because the house itself starts shaping the relationship whether anyone admits it or not. Every hallway carries tension, every shared kitchen moment reminds you who pays the bills, and every closed bedroom door feels less like independence and more like borrowed space. When a grown man moves back into a parental-style home, even if it is not his own parents, something subtle happens to his sense of control, and control is tied tightly to identity, especially when pride is already bruised by injury. Now add the fact that he cannot drive himself, cannot support himself financially, and cannot fully perform physically, and the imbalance grows thicker by the day. And then there is the underwear incident, which on the surface sounds almost ridiculous, almost comedic, like a reality TV blooper, but look closer and it starts to feel symbolic. Stray underwear in the mother's laundry basket is not just about laundry. It is about boundaries. It is about entitlement. It is about a guest forgetting he is a guest. When someone benefits from free housing, free food, and free care, yet still leaves traces of themselves in spaces that are not theirs, the message becomes louder than any argument ever could. Psychologically, regression is common when adults move back into parent-structured homes. Responsibilities soften. Roles blur. People unconsciously slip into teenage patterns. Instead of stepping up, they shrink back. Instead of leading, they defer. And if one partner regresses, the other often overcompensates, taking on more responsibility, more emotional labor, more control. That is how the caregiver dynamic quietly tightens its grip. So here is the uncomfortable reframing. When someone has nowhere else to go, are you their partner or are you their shelter? Because shelter comes with gratitude at first, but over time, it can breed complacency. And if that dynamic continues unchecked, what starts as support begins to feel like obligation. And what Courtney is doing inside that house goes far beyond offering a spare bedroom. At some point, the relationship stopped feeling like dating and started feeling like duty, and you can see it in the quiet, unglamorous moments that no one fantasizes about when they picture falling in love. Courtney is not just offering emotional support from the sidelines, she is helping him through physical therapy, adjusting his movements, assisting him in and out of clothes, managing routines that most adults handle privately without a second thought. When you move from holding hands to holding someone up in the shower, something shifts internally, even if you refuse to say it out loud. Care builds closeness, yes, but it also changes how you see the person in front of you, and not everyone is prepared for how fast that transformation happens. There is no playful tension in helping someone dress. There is no mystery in cleaning up after someone. There is no flirtation in medical recovery. Instead, there is responsibility, patience, repetition, and over time, responsibility can dull desire if both people are not actively protecting it. The tone of their interactions starts to soften in a different way. He becomes dependent. She becomes efficient. And efficiency is not seductive. So ask yourself quietly, if you were in her position, would attraction survive this dynamic? Would chemistry remain intact after weeks of physical caretaking? Or would your brain start filing that person under obligation instead of passion? Because while she is trying to be supportive and mature and loyal, insecurity begins to creep in through the crack. If he cannot be intimate, is it the injury or is it her? If he pulls away emotionally, is he healing or losing interest? This is where the discomfort deepens. When intimacy disappears, explanations matter. And if those explanations feel incomplete, doubt grows faster than trust ever did. And here is the subtle shift that makes this more complicated than a temporary medical setback. The tension in this relationship does not start and end in the bedroom. Silence in a bedroom speaks louder than any argument in the kitchen. And when physical intimacy stalls in a new relationship, especially one already built on imbalance, the air shifts in ways that are hard to ignore. They both try to dance around the issue carefully, keeping the language soft and the explanations medical, but frustration does not disappear simply because you lower your voice. He has openly described himself in the past as someone with a high appetite for intimacy, someone who thrived on passion and intensity, and now he finds himself unable to perform in the way he once did, living under someone else's roof, dependent on care, with his confidence already bruised. Embarrassment sits quietly behind his joke. You can see it when he compares past relationships to the present one, almost like he is reminding himself of who he used to be. That comparison is not about bodies, it is about ego. When a man who once framed himself as desired and dominant suddenly feels physically limited, what happens to his identity? Does he lean into humility, or does he deflect and blame the environment, the energy, the dynamic? Because when he hints that the vibe is off or that she is shy, it feels less like a factual observation and more like a defense mechanism. And then there is Courtney, who tries to stay supportive but cannot help internalizing the silence. If intimacy is not happening, the mind searches for reasons. Is it pain or is it lack of attraction? Is he healing or hesitating? Insecurity grows fastest when communication stays vague. No one is mocking a medical issue here. Recovery is real, frustration is human, but the emotional consequences are also real. And while they are trying to manage the awkwardness inside their room, another layer of tension is building outside of it, because his past is not exactly quiet, and there are exes online who have a lot to say. Reputation follows you into every new relationship, whether you acknowledge it or not. And in this case, the internet has not exactly been gentle. Multiple exes have spoken publicly about alleged cheating, about deception, about patterns that look less like isolated mistakes and more like recurring behavior. And while online accusations should never replace evidence, they do shape perception. When enough smoke surrounds someone, the next partner cannot pretend the air is clear. Courtney may want to focus on the version of him sitting in her parents' house, recovering from injury, but she is not dating a blank slate. She is dating a man with history, and history has a habit of resurfacing at inconvenient times. Now, to be fair, past mistakes do not automatically lock someone into permanent failure. People can grow, people can mature, pain can change perspective, but growth requires transparency, and transparency does not thrive in half-truths or omissions. This is where the tension sharpens. If he insists he has changed, then consistency matters. Words matter less than behavior. And behavior is happening in real time. Courtney already struggles with trust, and that struggle is not irrational paranoia pulled from nowhere. It is informed by what she has seen, what she has heard, and what she senses when communication feels incomplete. When someone has a public reputation for crossing lines, reassurance alone is not enough. It needs reinforcement through action. Here is the hard part. Secrecy is not a past tense issue. It is a present tense choice. Every message left unanswered, every conversation kept quiet, every detail withheld feeds uncertainty more than any rumor ever could. And while she is trying to believe she is witnessing a new chapter, there is still someone whose name continues to appear in his messages. You can try to outrun your past, but you cannot delete it, especially when former partners are speaking out in public and attaching your name to words like cheating, manipulation, and betrayal. Whether every claim is accurate or not, the pattern is what people notice. When more than one ex points to similar behavior, the narrative stops looking random and starts looking consistent. That does not automatically make him guilty in every new situation, but it does mean the next woman walking into his life is not starting from neutral ground. She is stepping into a storyline that already has chapters. Courtney knows this. She has heard the accusations. She has seen the clips. She has likely scrolled through comments where strangers feel confident diagnosing a relationship they are not inside of. And even if she wants to give him a clean slate, trust does not reset with good intentions alone. Trust rebuilds slowly, through repeated proof, through openness, through actions that align with promises. Past mistakes do not lock someone into permanent failure, but they do raise the bar. If you have a history of crossing lines, the responsibility to draw clearer boundaries in your next relationship becomes heavier. This is where the tension stops being theoretical and becomes personal, because secrecy is not something that only lives in history. Secrecy is a current decision. It is choosing not to disclose. It is choosing silence when clarity would protect the relationship. It is telling yourself you are avoiding conflict when you are really postponing accountability. If you say you are a changed man, but your behavior still requires hiding, then change has not fully arrived. Courtney wants to believe growth is happening in front of her. She wants to believe she is witnessing transformation, not repetition. But while she is defending him against online criticism, there is still one uncomfortable fact sitting quietly in the background. There is a woman whose name has not disappeared from his messages. Diana enters this story like a quiet thread hanging from a sleeve, easy to ignore until one tug pulls the whole outfit apart. Because while Courtney is pouring energy into recovery routines and carrying the emotional weight of a lopsided living arrangement, Colt keeps a connection alive with a Brazilian woman whose place in his life never fully closed. The detail that stings is not romance in the abstract. The detail that stings is timing, because this contact started before the retreat, before the accident, before the move into Courtney's family home, and even after Courtney stepped into nurse mode and offered stability, he still did not cut the cord. He admits he would have visited Diana if the accident did not derail his plans, and that single admission changes the frame, because a future trip is not harmless chatting. A future trip signals intention, and intention tells the truth more cleanly than reassurance ever will. Now, the defense some people will reach for is obvious. People talk to exes. People keep doors half open while life feels uncertain. People hesitate before making a clean break. Fine, hold that thought for fairness. Then look at the current situation again. A woman is cleaning up after a man, helping with his body, his schedule, his recovery, all inside her parents' home, and the man still holds on to another connection. Because letting go feels hard. Hard for whom? Hard because he fears losing Courtney? Or hard because he fears losing Diana? Or hard because he fears losing both options and ending up with none? Ask yourself a sharper question. Is silence protection or manipulation? Protection would look like ending outside contacts, reducing risk, matching actions with commitment. Manipulation looks like hiding the truth to keep benefits flowing, comfort, housing, care, emotional support, while maintaining a backup plan. Watch the pattern, not the speeches, because speeches cost nothing, and secrecy costs trust. And Colt knows one thing with brutal clarity. The moment Courtney learns the full truth about Diana, everything inside that house changes. He says he wants to grow old with her, to solve problems side by side, to build something lasting out of a situation that started in crisis. And on the surface, those promises sound warm and steady and mature, the kind of statements people replay in their heads when doubt creeps in. But words carry weight only when they walk in the same direction as behavior, and this is where the contrast becomes impossible to ignore. You cannot pledge lifelong commitment while quietly maintaining contact with someone you once planned to visit. You cannot talk about loyalty in the future while managing secrecy in the present. The language sounds devoted. The actions feel divided. This is not about catching someone in a technical lie. It is about pattern recognition. When someone has a history of blurred boundaries and in the middle of a new relationship, they keep a thread alive with another woman, the pattern does not disappear simply because the tone of voice softens. It adapts. It hides better. It sounds more thoughtful, but the structure remains the same. Convenience looks a lot like commitment when one person benefits from stability and care without fully surrendering their alternatives. Return to the beginning of this story. A woman wiping a grown man while he keeps another option in his phone. That contradiction is not dramatic exaggeration. It is the core tension. If Courtney ever realizes she was offering long-term devotion to someone who was still calculating short-term flexibility, the emotional fallout will not be mild. When a caregiver discovers she was a placeholder, the injury cuts deeper than betrayal because it reframes every sacrifice. If love requires hiding someone else, then it is not love. It is strategy. So ask the question that sits quietly beneath all his speeches about the future. Is he afraid of losing Courtney, or is he afraid of losing the roof over his head? It is easy to sit outside a relationship and point at the warning signs, but inside it feels different because Courtney is not operating from ignorance. She is operating from hope, and hope has a way of softening sharp edges until they look manageable. When you meet someone at a low point in their life, injured, vulnerable, dependent, something inside you activates, a desire to be the safe place, the one who stayed, the one who did not walk away when things were hard. That role feels meaningful. It feels noble. It feels like proof of depth. And when you step into that role, red flags do not always register as danger. They register as challenges. There is also the quiet pull of being needed. When someone relies on you for physical support, emotional reassurance, housing, structure, it creates a bond that feels intense and intimate. Being the fixer can feel powerful in its own way. If he improves, if he heals, if he becomes better, part of that success feels tied to you. That validation can blur judgment. You start believing that your loyalty is shaping his growth, that your patience is rewriting his past. But here is the uncomfortable question that deserves space. Are you drawn to potential or proof? Potential is intoxicating. It is full of what could be, what might change, what promises are waiting to become real. Proof is quieter. Proof shows up in actions repeated consistently without being asked. And when those two clash, people who lead with heart often choose potential because it feels romantic. Courtney is not foolish. She is invested. There is a difference. Investment makes you rationalize delays, overlook inconsistencies, defend someone against criticism, because admitting doubt feels like admitting your effort might be misplaced. And the problem with investment is that the longer you pour into something uncertain, the harder it becomes to step back, especially when the truth is inching closer to the surface and exposure feels inevitable. Secrets do not explode overnight. They settle into the walls quietly, and over time they change the atmosphere in ways you cannot see, but you can feel. At first it is small things, a delayed response, a guarded tone, a phone turned face down more often than usual. Nothing dramatic enough to confront, nothing obvious enough to accuse, but enough to plant a seed. And once that seed is planted, every past detail begins to rearrange itself into a pattern. The stray underwear in the laundry no longer feels like a joke. The bedroom silence no longer feels purely medical. The caregiving dynamic starts to look less romantic and more transactional. And the Brazilian messages, once framed as harmless contact, begin to carry more weight than anyone wanted them to. Trust does not collapse in a single moment. It erodes. It chips away in quiet increments until one final piece falls, and the structure cannot hold itself up anymore. When someone hides information to avoid conflict, they believe they are buying time. But what they are really doing is accumulating damage, because the longer a secret lives, the more every memory becomes contaminated by it. A compliment sounds rehearsed. A promise sounds strategic. A future plan sounds conditional. And here is where the inevitability sets in. Courtney has already invested emotionally, physically, financially through her family's support. If she discovers that while she was stepping up as partner and nurse, he was maintaining a connection with another woman, she will not only question his loyalty, she will question her own judgment. That kind of realization hits deeper than anger. It hits pride. Ask yourself honest, how much would you tolerate before your sympathy turns into self-protection? Would you excuse delayed honesty because of injury? Would you justify secrecy because of fear? Or would you see the pattern forming and step back before it tightens? Because once exposure happens, and it almost always does, there is no soft landing waiting on the other side. By the time everything settles, the most uncomfortable realization is not about injury, or intimacy, or even Diana. It is about structure. The injury did not create dysfunction in this relationship. It exposed it. It removed distractions. It stripped away surface chemistry and left only behavior under pressure. When someone is healthy and independent, patterns hide inside charm and momentum. When someone is dependent, living under your roof, relying on your care, the truth surfaces faster because there is nowhere for it to hide. Caretaking did not break this relationship. Caretaking accelerated clarity. It forced roles into place quickly. She became provider, nurse, emotional anchor. He became dependent, defensive, secretive. Those roles magnified everything that was already there. If transparency had matched his promises, this story would feel different. If he had cut outside ties cleanly and aligned actions with words, the injury might have strengthened the bond instead of testing it. Reform is not declared, it is demonstrated. Growth is not proven through speeches about the future, it is proven through uncomfortable honesty in the present. And when someone avoids that honesty because it risks comfort, housing, stability, then the motive deserves scrutiny. The deeper lesson here is not about one couple. It is about how easily rescue gets mistaken for romance. When you meet someone at their lowest point, it feels meaningful to be the one who stays. But staying is not the same as building. Saving someone does not guarantee they choose you freely once they stand again. There is no neat bow to tie here. Only a question that lingers quietly after the credits roll. If love requires you to ignore your instincts, is it love or is it fear of walking away from what you already invested? And if this story feels familiar, wait until you see what happens when another 90-day couple confuses loyalty with obligation and calls it destiny.